$1 million. That's what it cost to build a single tunnel under the U.S. Mexico border. Half a mile long. Air conditioning, hydraulic elevators, rail tracks for moving cargo, and it was just one of 37 tunnels operating at the same time. But here's what's insane. The tunnels aren't even the valuable part anymore. The real prize is 6 miles of border territory that generates more revenue than the entire country of Iceland. El Chapo controlled it for decades. Then his sons inherited it. And within 18 months of taking over, they made one decision so catastrophically bad that over 400 people lost their lives. Culiacán turned into a conflict zone, and they still don't control the route. What they did next will blow your mind. But first, you need to understand why this 6-mile stretch is worth killing for. Chapter 1. The most valuable real estate on Earth. The Tijuana-San Diego Corridor. 6 miles of border territory. Every single day, 50,000 vehicles cross through the San Isidro port of entry. 25,000 pedestrians. Each crossing is an opportunity. An opportunity that, according to DEA reports, generates an estimated $29 billion annually in illicit trade. That's more than Nike's yearly revenue. That's larger than the GDP of 90 countries. And for decades, one organization controlled it absolutely: the Sinaloa cartel under Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. But in February 2017, everything changed. El Chapo was extradited to the United States. His sons, Ivan Archibaldo and Jesus Alfredo Guzman, known as Los Chapitos, inherited the operation, and they also inherited a problem most people don't talk about: their father's partner. Ismael El Mayo Zambada, 73 years old at the time, had been co-leading Sinaloa since the 1980s. Unlike El Chapo, Mayo had never been arrested. Authorities barely had photographs of him. He survived by staying invisible, making calculated decisions, and avoiding unnecessary conflict. So picture this situation: 2 sons in their 30s, raised in wealth, accustomed to their father handling the difficult decisions. Across the table sits a legend who's evaded law enforcement for 4 decades and controls extensive networks they barely understand. Both sides know the crown jewel, that corridor. Both sides want control, and neither wants to fight the other directly. Yet, Chapter 2. The alliance that made no sense. Los Chapitos made their first major strategic move in 2019. They formed an alliance with the Tijuana cartel. Now, if you know cartel history, your jaw should be on the floor right now. The Tijuana cartel, also known as the Arellano Felix organization, had been Sinaloa's mortal enemy for decades. In 1993, they allegedly attempted to eliminate El Chapo at the Guadalajara airport. The conflict between these organizations defined Mexican organized crime in the 1990s and 2000s. But by 2019, the Tijuana cartel was weakened. Mexican authorities had taken down most of their leadership. Their territory had been carved up by rivals. They were vulnerable. And Los Chapitos saw an opportunity: rehabilitate their father's former enemies, give them protection and resources, and in exchange, get experienced local operators who understood Tijuana's infrastructure. On paper, it seemed clever. In reality, it signaled something else entirely to everyone watching. Los Chapitos couldn't hold the corridor alone. And in the organized crime world, perceived weakness invites challenges. The biggest challenge was already positioning itself: Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG. Chapter 3. The organization that changed the rules. While Sinaloa dealt with internal succession drama, CJNG had been expanding aggressively throughout Mexico. Their approach was fundamentally different. Traditional cartels operated like businesses, bribing officials, maintaining low profiles, avoiding attention. CJNG's leader, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, was a former law enforcement officer who understood something crucial: intimidation works better than negotiation. In May 2015, CJNG operatives shot down a Mexican military helicopter in Jalisco using a rocket-propelled grenade. This was unprecedented. No criminal organization in Mexico, had ever downed a military aircraft before. The message was clear. CJNG wasn't afraid of direct confrontation with government forces. Then, in October 2019, when authorities detained El Mencho's son Ovidio in Culiacán, they later released him due to security concerns. CJNG responded by creating chaos across Guadalajara, Mexico's second-largest city. They set up blockades using burning vehicles, effectively shutting down major sections of the metropolitan area for hours. These weren't just acts of defiance. They were demonstrations of operational capability. CJNG was showing everyone, rival organizations, government forces, potential recruits, that they had the resources and coordination to challenge authority directly. And they had been expanding their territorial control steadily. By 2020, they operated in multiple states. That Tijuana corridor was next on their list. Chapter 4. The messages start appearing. In 2021, things took a dark turn in Culiacán, the capital of Sinaloa state and the cartel's traditional stronghold. Victims started appearing with messages, not in Tijuana, where territorial disputes were expected. In Culiacán, where Sinaloa was supposed to have absolute control, the messages referenced Los Chapitos specifically. They accused them of betraying organizational principles, of making deals that weakened Sinaloa's position. And here's what everyone realized. These messages weren't from CJNG. They were from within Sinaloa itself. El Mayo's faction was sending signals. The internal dispute was becoming external. The facade of unity was cracking. This is when plaza bosses, local operational managers, started making calculations. In organized crime, stability equals profitability. Conflict disrupts supply chains, invites law enforcement attention, and makes everyone's life harder. When the two major factions of your organization start publicly feuding, you start considering alternatives. And CJNG was making offers. Chapter 5. Tijuana becomes a pressure cooker. By 2023, Tijuana was operating under a fractured command structure. Los Chapitos and their allies controlled certain zones. El Mayo's loyalists controlled others. CJNG was pushing in from the east and south, testing boundaries. And importantly, local operatives were hedging their bets, maintaining relationships with multiple factions simultaneously. According to Mexican government reports, incidents in Tijuana escalated dramatically. In March 2023, an incident occurred at a public market where 9 civilians lost their lives in what authorities described as targeted actions that endangered bystanders. The tragedy illustrated how territorial disputes were increasingly affecting civilians who had nothing to do with organized crime. What made the situation more complex was the ambiguity. When such incidents occurred, multiple organizations would blame each other. Nobody would claim responsibility. This created an atmosphere of pervasive uncertainty. Local residents couldn't identify safe zones. Law enforcement couldn't determine which organization to focus on. The confusion itself became a weapon. The Mexican government deployed the National Guard to Baja California. They increased security checkpoints. They arrested mid-level operatives. The violence continued because the fundamental economic incentives remained unchanged. That corridor represented too much revenue for any organization to simply walk away. Chapter 6. The arrest that changed everything. July 25, 2024. Ismael El Mayo Zambada was detained by U.S. federal authorities in Texas. This was extraordinary for several reasons. First, Mayo had evaded capture for over 4 decades, one of the longest runs in cartel history. Second, the circumstances were unusual. He arrived on a private aircraft near El Paso. Authorities were waiting. According to statements later attributed to Mayo's legal team, he claimed the flight was arranged under false pretenses, that he believed he was attending a meeting and was allegedly deceived into boarding. This raised immediate questions. Who arranged the flight? Who had the access and motivation to set up someone that high level? Was it coordinated with U.S. authorities? Or was it purely an internal organizational move? The speculation was intense. Some analysts suggested Los Chapitos orchestrated it to eliminate their rival for control. Others proposed that Mayo's own people considered him a liability, too old, too cautious for the modern landscape. Still others theorized that U.S. authorities had been negotiating with someone inside Sinaloa for months. Regardless of the truth, the effect was immediate and devastating. The last figure with enough respect and connections to maintain organizational cohesion was gone. The restraints were off. Chapter 7: Culiacán in Crisis. Within 2 weeks of Mayo's detention, Culiacán experienced its worst period of insecurity in recent history. Armed confrontations broke out in commercial districts during business hours. Schools closed for extended periods. Many businesses shuttered temporarily or permanently. The Mexican military deployed significant personnel to their own capital of Sinaloa State. The U.S. State Department issued a Level 4 travel advisory for Sinaloa. Do not travel. The same classification used for active conflict zones. This wasn't hyperbole. The situation on the ground resembled low-intensity conflict more than traditional criminal activity. What drove this escalation? Mayo's loyalists blamed Los Chapitos for their leader's detention. Whether true or not, the perception created justification for retaliation. Los Chapitos were simultaneously dealing with CJNG pressure in Tijuana and Mayo's faction in Culiacán. They were fighting on multiple fronts without the resources or experience to manage both effectively. According to data compiled by Mexican security analysts, the casualty count since Mayo's detention exceeded 400 by early 2025. To put that in perspective, that's more than certain military operations that made international headlines. And these numbers only reflect confirmed reports. Actual figures could be higher. Chapter 8: The Incident That Crossed the Line. In October 2024, something unprecedented occurred. Armed individuals attacked a Mexican military installation outside Culiacán, not a police station or checkpoint, a full military base with trained personnel and defensive positions. According to military reports, the assault was coordinated. The attackers used armor-piercing ammunition. They demonstrated tactical awareness. The engagement lasted approximately 40 minutes before the attackers withdrew. 3 military personnel lost their lives. This represented a significant escalation. Historically, Mexican criminal organizations avoided direct military confrontation. They might ambush patrols or target isolated personnel, but assaulting a fortified installation crossed a threshold. It suggested either desperation or a fundamental shift in operational philosophy. Security analysts noted that such tactics resembled insurgent behavior more than traditional organized crime. When a group becomes willing to engage military forces directly in sustained combat, the dynamics change. It's no longer about profit maximization. It becomes about territorial control and political influence through force. Chapter 9: The Economics That Won't Stop. Here's what makes this situation so intractable. Through all of this, every confrontation, every casualty, every military deployment, the Tijuana-San Diego corridor continues operating. Because the economic incentives are too powerful to stop. According to U.S. overdose statistics, synthetic substances have driven record-breaking fatality numbers in recent years. The demand hasn't decreased. If anything, it has intensified. And that demand creates supply pressure that flows through specific geographic choke points. The Tijuana corridor is the primary one. Every organization involved understands this. They're not fighting over theoretical future profits. They're fighting over an operational pipeline that generates massive revenue daily. As long as that demand exists on the U.S. side, someone will control that supply route. The only question is who. Chapter 10: What happens next? So where does this end? The uncomfortable truth is that it likely doesn't, not in any traditional sense. Los Chapitos inherited an empire built on strategic patience and calculated risk management. Their father understood that maintaining infrastructure required avoiding unnecessary conflict. He would wait years for the right opportunity. He prioritized long-term stability over short-term gains. His sons have taken a different approach: reactive, aggressive, willing to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. The result has been catastrophic for organizational cohesion. The Sinaloa cartel, which once operated with relative unity of purpose, is now fractured between competing factions with irreconcilable differences. The Tijuana corridor, which once generated revenue smoothly under centralized control, is now contested territory where violence disrupts operations and invites law enforcement attention. Meanwhile, CJNG continues expanding. They don't need to win through direct confrontation. They just need to wait for Sinaloa's internal conflicts to weaken the organization further, then make strategic offers to whoever's left standing. It's patient, strategic, and effective. The Mexican government faces an impossible situation. They can deploy military personnel, increase enforcement operations, and arrest mid-level operatives. But unless the fundamental economics change, unless U.S. demand decreases or alternative supply routes become equally viable, the conflict will continue because too many people's livelihoods depend on that corridor remaining operational. Right now, that 6-mile stretch between Tijuana and San Diego continues moving products worth billions annually. The organizations fighting for control will continue their conflicts, and the casualties will continue mounting. Because in the end, when infrastructure becomes more valuable than human life, economics wins over ethics every time. El Chapo built his empire understanding that power comes from self-control first, territorial control second. His sons learned the opposite lesson, and everyone connected to this situation is paying the price for that misunderstanding.